Hunter pulled the trigger immediately after his countdown. With a loud bang, a bullet went through Mr. Gardner's ear. He let out a bone-chilling cry and held on to his bleeding ear, staggering backward. "Are you crazy? How dare you shoot me?" Mr. Gardner shouted hysterically. He thought Hunter was just all talk. Who knew that Hunter would really pull the trigger? "The next time, I won't miss my aim." Hunter cocked the gun and aimed it toward Mr. Gardner's face. "I'll ask again. Will you release Dustin, or will I?" Mr. Gardner shivered in fright. At this rate, it was highly possible that Hunter would go crazy and murder him in cold blood. As Mr. Gardner was stuck in a dilemma, a ruckus was heard at the door of the interrogation room again. An elderly man with snowy white hair rushed in with his men. "Mr. Granville?" At his arrival, the whole interrogation room went silent. The elderly man standing before them was the mayor of Swinton, the highest-ranking official in the city. He was truly the most powerful man in Swinton. "Finally, Mr. Granville is here. Rhys, you're dead meat. What's the use of getting Miss Harmon's and Mr. Anderson's help? As long as Mr. Granville is on our side, no one will be able to save you today." With the appearance of Mr. Granville, the expression on Draco's face changed from fear to arrogance. He laughed mockingly, knowing that Mr. Granville was here to back them up. He was their savior. When Natasha and Hunter came to save Dustin, Draco thought that they were doomed. Fortunately, Mr. Granville arrived just in time, which gave him peace of mind. "Mr. Anderson, you slapped and shot me in the ear for that punk's sake. You have gone too far. Now that my father-in-law is here, let's see how you will explain this to him." Mr. Gardner snickered with a resentful expression on his face. Weren't they so brazen a minute ago? He couldn't wait to see how impudent they would be now that the mayor of Swinton was here. What a coincidence, his timing was perfect. Mr. Granville knows how to make an entrance. Natasha frowned slightly. Mr. Granville's position as mayor was not to be trifled with. Even with Natasha and Hunter's influence, Mr. Granville's decision would be final. More importantly, Mr. Granville and Mr. Gardner are related by marriage. Were they going to open a can of worms? "Mr. Granville, your son-in-law is guilty of distorting the truth, taking bribes, and accusing the innocent. You must properly explain the situation to us today." Defying everyone's expectations, Hunter did not back down. He raised his voice and demanded an explanation from Mr. Granville. Even if Hunter was the president of the Chamber of Commerce, he was still under the jurisdiction of Mr. Granville. His actions were no less than rebellion against his superiors. "You're lying. I've always been righteous and impartial in my duties." Regaining his composure, Mr. Gardner rushed towards Mr. Granville and started accusing them. "Father, they were the ones who broke into the interrogation room without permission. Furthermore, Mr. Anderson shot me in the ear. Look at this, my ear is in a mess. Father, you have to bring them to justice." He revealed his wounded ear to Mr. Granville. It was a shocking sight to behold as the wound was still bleeding profusely. "Right. There's that kid." Ignoring Mr. Granville's dark expression, Mr. Gardner pointed toward Dustin. "He's the main cause of all this. Father, you must teach him a lesson. He even hit me in the stomach just now." "Shut up." Mr. Granville roared in anger and slapped Mr. Gardner's cheek. The force of his slap was so strong that Mr. Gardner was thrown a few feet away, stars circling above his head. "What? Everyone was dumbstruck at the sudden bombshell. Who would have expected Mr. Granville to reprimand Mr. Gardner instead of backing him up? What's going on? Natasha's jaw dropped. Dahlia was equally as shocked. Draco and his men couldn't believe their eyes. They were all stunned at the astonishing turn of events. "Father? Why did you hit me?" Mr. Gardner asked, bewildered, as he rubbed his burning cheek. He had never seen his father-in-law so furious. Mr. Gardner was confused as to what he had done wrong. "Bastard! You lock up the innocent and let the guilty walk free. How dare you try to defend yourself? I'm going to teach you a lesson," Mr. Granville declared righteously. "Father, what's wrong with you? I'm your son-in-law, aren't I?" Mr. Gardner was close to tears. Wasn't Mr. Granville here to save him? Why was he getting beaten up instead? "Don't call me your father-in-law. I don't have a despicable son-in-law like you." Mr. Granville scoffed and continued, "You accepted bribes and corrupted the law. In addition, you took liberties with your authority as a police inspector. As of now, you are fired from your position." "What?" When Mr. Granville announced this, Mr. Gardner shuddered in fear. His body was drenched in a cold sweat. Although he didn't know what caused the rift, Mr. Gardner knew that his father-in-law had decided to cut all ties with him. Furthermore, Mr. Granville was going to investigate and expose his past deeds. They had a good relationship before this. What could have happened for Mr. Granville to change so abruptly? Without any hesitation, Mr. Granville gave his last orders to the men standing behind him. "Come and arrest Mr. Gardner immediately. Once the investigation into his crimes is complete, throw him in jail." Mr. Gardner fell on his knees in dismay, his face ashen with despair. The only reason his father-in-law would be so harsh on him must be due to pressure from a superior who had intervened. That was why Mr. Granville had no choice but to toe the line as well. How could this happen? He had only detained Dustin, a punk with no background. How could this disaster have befallen him? Could it be? Could it be that the Rhys kid had some powerful people backing him up? That must be it. At this thought, Mr. Gardner was filled with regret that he had gone up against Dustin. Never in his dreams would he have imagined that a young punk had such formidable support. Even his father-in-law had to kowtow to him. All of it was Dwayne's fault. He was doomed because of Dwayne.